I'm Jeff Zycinski, welcoming you to this special edition of Ways to Wellbeing, coming to you from the brand new Festival of Walking and Wheeling here in the heart of Inverness. And as you can tell, we have a live and lively audience here at Eden Court Theatre. And as it is the Walking and Wheeling Festival, we're calling this episode, These Books Are Made for Walking. And our guest this time around is an author who extols the virtues and the benefits of both walking and cycling as part of her creative process. Her latest publication, The Bookseller of Inverness, is a gripping historical thriller set in the aftermath of the Battle of Culloden. And as well as offering a rattling good tale of intrigue and potential betrayal, it also paints a vivid picture of 18th century Inverness, and you can't but help notice the attention to detail born clearly from painstaking research. Its author, S.G. MacLean, we're going to be over-familiar and call her Shona. Shona, welcome to the festival. Please welcome Shona MacLean. So, Shona, the first question I have to ask you, given it, the nature of this festival, is how did you get here today?
I got here on my bike. I cycled here today.
Can you prove that?
Well, the bike's outside and my backpack's up there with my helmet, so...
Yeah, well, circumstantial evidence. Now, how far was that cycling?
About 13 miles, maybe, 14 from Conan Bridge.
Over the Keswick Bridge?
Yes. Uh-huh.
That's quite a journey. You know, you must have been checking the weather this morning.
I was checking the weather, yes, because I was determined to do it, but I was really glad it wasn't really windy or wet, yeah.
Yeah. Now, we invited you here today because a few months ago I was at the launch of The Bookseller of Inverness at Waterstones in Inverness, and I remembered you said about your love of walking and cycling and how it plays a part in when you're kind of researching locations. Tell us how that works.
Well, for all of my books, the way I get to know a setting really is by walking it. My previous books were set around Banff and Aberdeen, and then there's a series set in London which goes to Oxford, York and Bruges. And so I spend a long time looking at old maps, studying old maps. I draw maps myself of the places I'm writing about. But then if I can, I go and I walk the routes that my characters would take to try and absorb the atmosphere in the place. Because, what's his name, Ackroyd, can't remember his first name, wrote a book called London, the Biography, and he spoke about different areas of London having their own essence that lasted through the centuries. And I think you can really pick that up if you walk around a place. You can pick up the essence. The buildings might have changed, be different individuals there, but places quite often retain their essence.
Yeah, I was going to ask, you must see... Do you imagine how things used to look? Can you do that in your brain, having looked at the map and then gone to the location?
Yeah, I try and work it out, and I'll access any old illustrations or any old photographs of places before they were knocked down. Like Norman Newton's book Lost Inverness was really, really useful for me when I was writing The Bookseller of Inverness. So I create a town in my mind as I think it would have been, and I set my characters to play in that town and hope that when the reader comes to read it, it'll persuade them, they'll believe it as Inverness or London or York at the time.
Well, I certainly found that the case reading The Bookseller of Inverness. I was immediately immersed in that period of history for Inverness. Do you feel a wee bit like a time traveller?
A wee bit, but I think I'm in the wrong time now, because I've always just been a daydreamer, really. And even when I was little, I was fascinated by anything that looked old or by strange old sounding names. And I spent, from the ages of 3 to 12, we lived in Ballintor in Easter Ross. And we moved there when it was still a functioning salmon fishing village, a couple of years before the oil industry came. And many of you probably know about the Pictish stones of Nig, Shandwick and Hilton. And so when I was little, we believed that they were the gravestones, the grave markers of Danish princes. So, even when I was little, I was very conscious of the past and the stories of the past, and they really fascinated me.
That's quite unusual for a child, don't you think?
I think I probably was quite unusual in that. I mean, I remember being on a church holiday, and we went to visit the National Museum in Edinburgh, and I spent my pocket money on a facsimile of the last letter of Mary, Queen of Scots, and I was about 9 at the time, which is quite an odd thing for a 9-year-old to buy.
Now, I don't want to take a sinister turn here, but when you talk about going to these locations and getting a sense of your characters, it's exactly apparently what murder squad detectives do when they're investigating cold cases. They're told to get out from behind their desks and go to the location, and then something might click.
Yes.
Maybe you should have taken that as your
yes, maybe I should,
as your career. Now, when I was reading the bookseller of Inverness, the funny thing is, as part of our festival, I'd been out recording kind of videos, and I was out with Liam Shand. Where's Liam? He's over there, who does a kind of ghost walk around the town. And then, when I was reading your book, I was so immersed in Church Street, and because Church Street is probably one of the oldest streets in Inverness. Yes. When you walk down Church Street, are you seeing it the same way we would see it?
I probably am. I had to work quite hard to try and re-envisage it for the 18th century, because I know Inverness, or I've known Inverness since I was little. With other places like, say, London or York, I hadn't known them, so I could invent the 17th century town. But with Inverness, I had to find the 18th century towns. I had to scrape away the 20th, 21st centuries. But it was that whole thing of atmosphere and the spirit of a place that, I've got the idea for the book in Leakeys. To start with, when I read that the ghosts of the Jacobites who'd been imprisoned there were supposed to inhabit the place, and so then I was very aware of a sense of the people of the past in that part of Inverness.
I won't touch too much on the story in terms of spoilers, but you do give a sense of those years after Culloden, and not everyone was enthralled to the Jacobite cause in Inverness.
No. In fact, Inverness was, it was a trading town, so they didn't want upheaval. Most Invernessians didn't want upheaval. And, many of the Jacobite clans would come from outside the town. Inverness was really a kind of lowland town in many ways, although people would have spoken both English and Gaelic, but most of the Gaelic would be spoken outside the town. So by no means were all Invernessians keen on the Jacobite risings.
Yeah, it reminds me, I remember reading that as Prince Charles' army marched further south, they kept encountering this kind of apathy. By the time they got to Glasgow, which was another big city where people were making quite a lot of money in trade, thinking, well, we can't really be bothered with this kind of nonsense, And by the time they get over the border to England, the expected furore and passion that they were expecting to take them all the way to London just didn't manifest itself.
Yeah, wasn't there.
Right. So anyway, you mentioned research. Again, one of our partners at this festival has been Inverness Library. I know you make good use of libraries, but there was some difficulty because when you were writing this book, I think the library was closed because of COVID, is that right?
Because of COVID, yes. And so there were, most books you can get hold of online from second-hand book dealers and things like that. But there is a book called Old Inverness Booksellers that a friend, Jennifer Morag Henderson, told me was in the reference library, and the thought of this book was like sitting on my shoulder all through the writing of The Bookseller of Inverness. I thought, what is in this book but Old Inverness Booksellers? I need to know. But of course, reference libraries weren't accessible at that time. And I've since, talked to a librarian, and they said, we'd have tried to help you out, but I just didn't like to do, well, I'm an author, so I should have access to things like you do know who I am. So I couldn't get at this book, but the reference library did open very shortly before I had to submit the book. So I did manage to get in and see it, and it was a very, very thin little volume, and although the earliest bookseller they found in Inverness was 10 years after my book was set, there was nothing in it that I found catastrophic. So
a bit of an anticlimax after all.
It was, but it was a relief. Yeah. But so there were things like that, things I couldn't access as easily as I would have been able to in other circumstances.
Okay. Now, you've kindly agreed to give us a bit of a reading, and I asked for something that would evoke the streets of Inverness at that period, and you've chosen a section for us.
Yes, well, this is very near the beginning of the book. The main character is the bookseller, Ian McGilvery. He's 36 years old. He'd suffered badly, he was a Jacobite, suffered badly at the Battle of Culloden, and lost friends. And this is 6 years later. He's just trying to get on with his life day by day as a bookseller in his shop somewhere near the bottom of Church Street in Inverness. He lives on Church Street with his grandmother, who's a great Jacobite lady, and they live in a house that might be envisaged as somewhat like Abertarf House is. So this is a Saturday morning, and he's walking down to open up his shop. Ian collected his mended coat from the housemaid and shrugged it on as he walked through the courtyard before stepping out of the gate into the street. A breeze from the river carried with it a whiff of the tannery, and Ian felt the old longing to be in Strathnairn with his cousin Lachlan. But Lachlan's lifeblood had seeped long ago into the soil of Drumossie Moor, where he lay still with half of their clan at the Well of the Dead. Ian set his shoulders and walked more quickly, ignoring housewives and kitchen maids coming from small lanes and back courtyards with baskets over their arms or bundles of laundry on their backs. He ignored the dogs wandering down the street, and they ignored him, set as they were on making for the town middens to see what pickings might be had before the scaffy men got at them. They were lean, hungry things, not like the two terriers Aeneas kept to see to the rats that were so hated by Ian's grandmother. Some officers of the government's military survey were passing by on the other side of the street. Major Thornley, who originally came into the shop in search of mathematics books, or for drawing materials, or to have some old damaged volume rebound, gave Ian a brief nod, which he returned. There were not many redcoats, officer or otherwise, whom he would even acknowledge, but Thornley was one of them. Donald Moore, too, took extra care when preparing materials for him. An honourable man, and damned few amongst them, Donald would say, whenever Ian brought in a commission from the Major. There was little activity yet outside Katrina Lamont's house, and Ian's grandmother had often voiced the opinion that the servants were near as fond of their beds as the mistress. The toll booth, just beyond the Lamont house, gave no clue as to who within it might have summoned his grandmother at so early an hour of the morning. Ian went in the other direction, to the north. The massif of Benwivis stood immovable against a clear sky, not even a suggestion of a cloud troubling its long, level top. The bookshop was almost at the bottom of the street, a last bastion before commerce gave way to the relentless business of answering to God. Beyond his shop stood the graveyard of the High Kirk, where on Cumberland's orders Jacobite prisoners had been shot dead in cold blood. Then there was the kirk itself, whose ministers had in vain pleaded for mercy for those same prisoners. And at last there was the Gaelic church, where the captured of Culloden had been thrown one on the other like rubbish into a pit. Ian's stomach turned every time he thought of it. He would gladly have clambered over the bodies of dying men to be amongst those shot outside, but Cumberland had wanted a goodly number of prisoners to display to the people of London, and he'd found himself instead herded on to one of the prison hulks in Inverness Harbour and taken south. 6 years ago, his hand trembled as he searched in his coat pocket for the key to his shop.
And I hope the audience can now see what I mean by you can't walk down that street again, having heard that description, and not think of those things exactly the way I felt after going out on the Ghost Walk with Liam's group, exactly the way you feel after doing any kind of research about the places. Now, there is a phrase that writers are familiar with about murdering your darlings. You must have come across it.
Yes.
Killing your darlings,
Yes.
murdering your darlings. About having to leave out bits that you love,
Yes.
because it gets in the way of the story. When you were doing all this research, you can just tell you love the research element of the book.
Yes.
Was there loads you had to leave on your study floor?
Yes, there was. There's any of you who've read Inverness history from the 18th century will have come across Baillie John Stewart, who was a merchant of the town who left these tremendous letter books that ran for about 47 years worth of letters. And I've managed to get into the archive. It opened up quite early, and I managed to get in and read his letter book, and there was so much in there that I would have loved to have put in the book, but I had to leave out. And I'd set a scene of one of my main characters meeting him in a coffee shop on Castle Street, but it didn't actually add anything to the plot. I just put it in there to show that I'd known there was a coffee shop on Castle Street at the time. And there were other things, I'd taken a trip out to Whitebridge, which I think is just lovely. And so I had some characters going there and a big adventurous scene there. But again, it completely derailed the plot for a while, so it had to go. So yes, you have to be quite ruthless, and then your editor will be more ruthless.
Is your editor quite vicious?
Oh, she's terrible. She's honestly, and she does not share my sense of humour. So I will write scenes that I think are very humorous and really excellent exchanges that, I think over in my head several times, and they keep me warm, and then they'll come back, they're all deleted or suggested that they should be deleted.
Have you ever known an editor with a sense of humour?
No. I've had the same editor all the way through.
Now, getting back to walking, it is remarkable when you look at the work of writers all the way back from Dickens, Walter Scott. They were big walkers. I mean, they walked for miles to get inspiration. Stephen King, the horror writer, famously got knocked down, trying to unravel a plot while out walking. Is there something you think about walking that changes something in your brain, that puts you in a different bit of consciousness, do you think?
I think there must be. I mean, I have to walk twice a day with the dog. Most days I have with a dog, so I don't have a choice about it. And quite often I'll be sitting at my desk thinking, I've got this problem to work out, but I've got to go and walk the dog, and I wish I didn't have to go out. But I'll go out with the dog, and I won't consciously be thinking of it, but it'll pop into my head, and I'll be able to see through whatever problem I had, whatever complexities I couldn't quite sort out. And I think it's because other distractions just go away, and your mind can expand a bit. I feel like my mind expands a bit, and it's not so cluttered once I'm out.
So you unravel plot problems, but lose the dog because you're not...
No, the dog is always there.
Okay, now in a moment I'm going to give you some rapid fire questions, Shona, some of which you may be expecting, some of which you may be surprised by. But before that, I'm going to invite some questions from the audience, and I've explained to them that because this is a festival of walking and wheeling, instead of raising their hands, which we obviously can't hear or can't see on the podcast, they have to ring a bicycle bell. So let's see if that rings a bell with anyone. There's a kind of faint tinkle, I think, from the... Yes, I think this is a troublemaker from our Cheery Book Club, I think. It's Francis, isn't it? Before you answer that, just for the sake of the podcast edit, I'll repeat a précis of that question, which is Francis really asking about the location of your books and your stories. In fact, it's something I remember you mentioning yourself at the launch of the book, that you were kind of engaged in a wee bit of a battle with your publishers about your desire to write books closer to home, in the sense that might not have the broad appeal the publishers were looking for.
It didn't until this book came out, and I know that my publishers have been surprised by how popular and successful. It's been outside of Inverness. It's kind of bumped me up the pecking order a bit at my publishers. So I've got a book coming out in September which is set in York and is a kind of tidying up of the Damien Seeker series. But the book that I'm working on just now is set around Cromarty and the Black Isle in the 1830s. And it's not, all my books so far have been historical murder mysteries. It's not an historical murder mystery, so I don't know who will publish it when it comes out. It won't be published in the same way that these are. So yes, my I hope it might be out late 2024, maybe early 2025, but it's set around Cromarty and the Black Isle, the one that I'm working on just now. Thank you.
Any other bells ringing? They're so shy, this one is so shy. Okay, I'm going to hit you with the rapid fire questions. Okay, so you don't have to give me long answers. It can be yes or no, but if you feel the need to expand on a point,
okay,
or you go. So here we go. Can walkers and cyclists coexist?
Yes, but I think cyclists need to be aware of walkers and give them some space and slow down.
And have a bell.
And have a bell, yes.
Can walkers and dog walkers coexist?
Yes, but as a dog walker, I always get my dog back on the lead when I see bikes come in.
Do you have a bell on your bike and do you use it?
I do have a bell on my bike. I do use it, although I'm quite hesitant sometimes because it tends to give people a fright, as well as warning them. Some people kind of jump, but I do use it.
Can you mend a puncture?
Theoretically. It's one of the things that my husband's very good at, so so far he's done it.
Now, who would you like to play one of your characters in a Hollywood movie adaptation?
I would like Ian Glenn to be Hector from The Bookseller of Inverness. Yeah.
Why?
I just think he'd be perfect for it. I think he's got the reddish hair, he's got the charm, he's handsome, he's about the right age, and then I could meet him.
That's the only reason you write these books. Is there any interest in adaptation for TV or
There have been a couple of queries about the Seeker series, and there was about 2 or 3 months ago a query about The Bookseller of Inverness, the availability of rights for that. But as far as I know, that's as far as it's gone. And as you'll know, it takes a huge amount of time and loads of stages before anything actually gets put into production. So there's no sign of that at the moment.
Well, I think it would be a brilliant movie because I could see it as a movie as I was reading it, so, beginning with the battle scene and, it's got movie written all over it. Do you listen to audiobooks while walking?
Not while walking, no. I listen to audiobooks while doing housework, but while walking I don't listen to anything because I've got the dog and I quite like the sounds of the birds and all that sort of thing.
Will you listen to this podcast?
Yes, I will.
What is the creepiest place you visited in Inverness?
The creepiest place? I'd say, round about the bus station at night. Genuinely. But probably Greyfriars Kirkyard.
Yeah, okay. Should we do this festival next year?
Definitely, yeah.
And you might struggle with this question, but it's your final question, Shona. Who's going to win the cup final, Celtic or Inverness Cali?
Inverness Cali.
That's the right answer. Shona, thank you very much for being our guest on Ways to Wellbeing.